All right, next item is District Auditor.
Tim provided in his business report on page 20 some information on that, and I don't know if you included it in your action sheet under this topic, or do they have to refer back to page 20? Or is this,
I don't, is there an action sheet? I don't think there's.
I don't think there is, that's why
There isn't an
so do
action
you gotta refer back to page 20 to read what you wrote on the auditor?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
Do you wanna
So
update
there
us?
are just a number of items. One was that Evan Marshall and Pease had sent in a response that was included in board book to the questions that had come up with regard to the audit, and a couple items that needed clarification. One was to explain what was in the non-spendable category. And in the audit, in the operations fund, there's an amount of $186,720 that's classified as non-spendable. When we did the construction, because of the fact that we were increasing the infrastructure for electricity, we had to make a deposit with Commonwealth Edison, and we gave them a deposit of $244,000. What they're doing is they're paying that back to us over a 10-year period. So that amount is included in our financials as an asset, but it's obviously not spendable because we don't have it. So that's what falls into that category.
And I remember that too when we came up with it, when that bill came through, that they were rebidding it back over certain.
And then there was also a question with regard to policy 4:30, which I think is coming up on the agenda. It's the next item on the agenda, one of the next items on the agenda.
You also got quotes?
I did go out, one of the things that the board had asked about at the last meeting when we talked about renewing the contract with Evan Marshall and Pease for the next 3 years. I did get quotes from them, which I provided to you in board book. I think next year is $17,200, which is the exact same amount we paid this year. And it goes up to $17,900 in the third year of the contract. I did contact some other firms. I contacted a firm that I used to deal with by the name of Miller Cooper, and they said that knowing that we had Evans, Marshall, and Pease, they didn't even feel they could compete with them, so they wouldn't even give us any kind of a quote. I talked to Baker Tilly, who is a firm a fairly large firm that's the outgrowth of what used to be Virchow Krause. Their estimate was $20,000 to $21,000. And another firm that we actually got a quote from 3 years ago, which is a company called Eder Casella, they estimated about $20,000. So from just an annual audit standpoint, Evans, Marshall, and Pease significantly less. There was a question regarding whether or not that's a concern that they're that much less. I mean, I think they do. I think they do a good job with the audit. I don't think that we're going to receive anything significantly different if we go with another firm. And I also talked to Evans, Marshall, and Pease about doing an audit of our internal controls. They had originally thought that there might be some kind of a conflict of interest. They did decide after looking at it that they didn't think there would be. They quoted us a dollar amount of $6,000 to $7,000. I talked to Baker Tilly, and they gave me a price of $20,000. And obviously the question comes up, why is there such a difference? Baker Tilly really doesn't know our district. They don't know our financials. I think if we wanted to go forward with an internal control audit, we put together a fairly detailed RFP. That amount may come down significantly. Evans, Marshall, and Pease obviously is quoting $6,000 to $7,000, but they know our books. They know our financial situation. They know exactly what they would have to do. So it really would be up to the board to decide if you want to spend that kind of money, to have them come in and look at the internal controls. The only thing I would say is that when they come in and do their audit, they do look at internal controls. I mean, they test accounts payable, they test payroll. And when they do those tests, they look to make sure all of the approvals are there. They'll pull payroll, information on various individuals, and they go back and they check to make sure this has been approved by the board, that there's a salary memo that's been signed by the superintendent. They check timesheets to make sure that they've been approved. They go through those same kind of checks with accounts payable. So I think in their report, they're saying they haven't done an extensive audit of our internal controls, but they do say, during our audit, we did not identify any deficiencies in internal control that we consider to be a material weakness. So that there is a part of their audit that deals with internal controls. It's not as extensive as what we would get if we went out and had them do an audit specifically on that.
Any comments from the board?
Yeah, I think we should do an RFP, find out what the proper steps of what it would cost to internal control. And no disrespect to you, but when you put them on there and make them say, they're clearly saying they do not do an audit of our internal controls, which means we don't really have a good feel. We should not be getting from that audit. That's why I pushed them to say it. Regardless of what they do, they will not put their name on the line and say, we've audited your internal controls and we're telling you that we're saying they're good. They do spot checks. In the spot checks, they didn't find any problems. And they specifically say, but we didn't do an audit. We can't give an opinion on that. I mean, we have a duty to do this. We've seen other agencies where there's been problems with this, and it's not a reflection on anybody on our staff. It's a fact of, if we're doing our due diligence, this should be done in some periodic basis, and nobody knows the last time it was done. So it's certainly, and again, if you need help, I'd volunteer to help put an RFP together if you want, but I think we should at least go out there, go to, whether it's these 4 firms you said, ask, tell them what we want, ask them what they would do on an internal control audit, and get a price for it. So we can make a intelligent decision whether it's worth, based on the money, to hire somebody to do an internal control audit.
Any other comments from board?
It's a requirement, isn't it, that we have some notation on our internal controls?
Yes, it's in one of our policies.
But I don't think the policy goes as far as you need an audit of it.
It says the superintendent will, didn't it say audit? Did I send it last time, Kevin?
I don't think the superintendent's qualified to
I
audit it.
completely agree.
So, my feeling is at this point in time, this year, an audit isn't necessary. I agree with what Tim is saying, that the auditor does test the internal control somewhat.
Okay. Anybody else? Gary? Ed?
Well, it doesn't cost us as a board to put an RFP out there, and we could learn something about the field. I think if one board member feels strongly, we should entertain that.
Well, let's look at, one board member is not a majority, so looking to the board, I'm just gonna, how many people would want us to go out for an RFP on the internal controls? 3? How many do not?
I would say, if we want to plan on something maybe with the next audit, a year from now perhaps, or,
Well, that's what I was gonna ask, if the time's not right now, how about,
is there any economy to scale to do it alongside the regular audit?
Tim, could they do that?
That he'd have to go back and ask
Yeah.
him. but-
Yeah, I'd have to go back and ask. I mean, that's obviously the time of the year when, if they're working with schools, they're doing all of the regular audits for the school districts. But I can certainly ask
Okay.
if it can be done at that time.
All right, so I got 3. You want to wait until we have the
I'm
audit?
inclined to have it done, but
We're just asking for the RFP, and that would give us information to make an informed decision. Just step one. Doesn't mean we have to do it, but we would have information so we can be informed on what's the best way to go.
Well, let's have what do you want, John?
what's the time requirement for that, Tim, for you to do that?
For me to put together an RFP, I'd have to, I mean, I don't know, in the next month or so. I mean, I'm not,
Does it take you a day to do it, or?
a day? No, I mean, I think to put together an RFP to have a regular audit done there are resources, you can get that, this is something a little bit more specialized. I'd have to look to see what I could find, I don't know.
I'm inclined to have him produce the RFP.
Okay. So, given that, maybe superintendent's advisory finance council can work on that, so.
I could just
Policy
say,
480 says the superintendent or designee shall annually audit the district's financial business operations for compliance with established internal controls, provide the results to the board. And the auditor specifically said he doesn't do that as part of his audit. So again, and I pointed this out last meeting, that we either have to follow our policies or we have to amend our policies.
Okay.
so Tim and I will get you we'll put out an RFP. The board does not need to approve the RFP, correct? The RFP is for us to put out, get quotes, and then bring back those quotes to the board.
True.
Correct?
Yep.
Fine with me.
All right.
Is Tim's point about going to the committee, is that gonna happen? Because maybe we need to amend the policy.
Well, I got two people here.
We've looked at it with Kevin at the policy level.
But it says a year, he's got a point. Maybe we need to change it to 5 years or something.
Well, I think what needs to be clarified is Tim's definition, Mr. Walsh's definition of an internal control audit to maybe the rest of the boards. You know, we've reported out there was a couple times that we were asked to bring in our business office procedures for purchasing. We reported out on some purchasing procedures for technology. So I would assume all those are internal controls. But I did not they've been not a specific report to where you say, hey, here's our internal controls report. I think this is strong, this is weak.
And I agree, it's like over the last 2 years, it's every month, questioning bill after bill after bill and having them say why they bought the iPad, why they bought this, how they bought it, you know, was there a purchase order, was it over budget, was it not over budget? I mean, all those things go to the overall internal controls of how they're doing things. And every time we have questions on the bills and how we're purchasing things and what we're purchasing and why we're purchasing, they have explanations for why they're doing that. They did bring to us, you know, how they do the purchase orders, how the purchase orders go from one person to a different person, and how they're filed. And, you know, all these bills that we're approving, there's a stack of paperwork that any board member can take a look at to see if they think the paperwork's proper. I'm just not sure that the policy is correct as to the superintendent should do an audit. That definition for a CPA of an audit versus the definition of what that policy expects him to do as an audit, that's something that, you know, at the policy level, we're talking to him about trying to find out some of those answers and to what is the correct thing that he should be doing, you know. But for me right now, from what I've seen over the years, I'm not sure at this point in time today we should rush out and get an internal control audit done for an amount of money that's on the board, that's on the table here. I just don't see the end value of that in the end. You know, we have 7 people looking over the purchases very carefully, looking over the budget accounts very carefully. And like today, when we approved $1.6 million of expenditures or whatever we did, you know, we did that with very little backup.
Exactly.
But the backup is available to look at if
But
you'd like.
Not only is, first of all, 4 people voted on the RFP, which when we've done that before, we've decided to move on. But since we're trying to talk people out of it, if you could go through that list, and we take time to go through what's given, and some people ask questions, some don't, and nobody knows at this table that didn't look. And anybody who does an internal control will tell you is when there's a problem with it, like somebody said at the presentation we were at the IASP, you know, the person set up a separate account, they were sending bills out. We look at it and we assume it's what it's for. We assume it's going to what it is. And I'm pretty confident that's true, very confident. But we don't know for sure, and you cannot make that determination unless somebody takes a look at it who has the expertise to do that.
you're arguing against the internal control audit.
Yeah.
Let them go and get the RFP.
I'm
At that
not
point, then we can
arguing
just-
about not getting the
Okay,
RFP.
then we can have to discuss the merits of whether even an internal control audit will actually capture 100% of any
We
internal.
know that wouldn't.
It won't. So you're gonna get an internal control audit that's not gonna be able to test 100% of the internal controls 100% of the time. So therefore, one has to recognize the merits of that test. So let's get the RFP, let's get the money, let's weigh the fact of spending 17,000 or whatever it's gonna come out to be, or a .2 teacher, or whatever it's gonna be, and the merits of that.
You know, we spend a year.
So I'm saying, let's go and get the
Yeah,
RFP, let's
right.
move on.
But we spent a year putting 10,000 documents on the website because we thought there were improprieties. And all those documents are on the website. They're wieldy and cumbersome. In fact, we have to use a backup server to support them. And nobody found anything.
And
But
what-
we did it because somebody had a concern. And so if there are concerns here, we need to respect
And
that.
I'm saying, let's get the RFP, and then at which point we can discuss the merits of internal control audit.
Right, and so
Okay,
we'll get the
let's move
RFP,
on.
right,
Okay,
good.